Hi everyone, Andrea here with Crafts on the Move with a tutorial on how to make this really pretty poinsettia card featuring Spellbinders Full Bloom Poinsettia Glimmer Plate and Stencil Bundle. This includes the stencils and the glimmer plate. And then the card I'm making today also feature a sentiment from the Merry Messages Better Press. I did foil that sentiment and I'll be using the Merry Christmas. And then I also use the silver glimmer foil from Spellbinders for the hot foiling. The inks I will be using are the Tim Holtz Distress inks. I will be using Tumbled Glass, Stormy Sky, Chipped Sapphire, Lost Shadow, Weathered Wood. I will also be using Mustard Seed, Mowed Lawn, Rustic Wilderness, Ground Espresso, and Walnut Stain. You will also need your coordinating blending brushes. Going over some of the tools and supplies that you are going to want to have readily available to make the card. And I might not mention everything. There might be some tools, supplies that I pick up here and there throughout the card making that I forgot to tell you. So just take note of those. But I think I have everything here. So I will be using my Altenew sticky mat to stencil with. And then I have wipes to wipe my stencils down and my hands, my guillotine paper trimmer. I will also be using Post-it notes and copier paper for masking parts of the stencil. I'll be using liquid and dry adhesive along with my glimmer machine and my die cutting machine, scissors, and I think that about covers it. As I mentioned, you might see me use something else that I forgot, but it should be a basic tool. We are going to get into the pieces that you're going to need for the card next. The pieces that you need for the card, it's not a lot. As I mentioned, you'll need your inks and the blending brushes. I did foil my sentiment and I pre-cut it, and then I pre-cut a couple of just plain sentiments on scratch paper, and that is so that I can add a little dimension to my sentiment when I add it to my card. I also am using the silver glimmer foil. I will be foiling on some hammer mill paper. This is the 100-pound cardstock. This is the paper with the chameleon on it. And then I also have a 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel of the Spellbinders mirror cardstock and a top fold A2 card panel. Next, we'll get into making the card. The first thing I'm going to do while my machine is heating up is I'm going to go ahead and glue these layers together for the sentiment. So these are done, and then I'll set them aside. And then the next step will be foiling the panel and then using the stencils to add the color to the panel. A couple of basic quick tips about using your glimmer plates and your glimmer machine. We will be using a glimmer plate. That's what the bundle includes. And the difference between a glimmer and a better press is that the glimmer is this like coppery brownish color and a better press is a silver matte color. The glimmer plate can only be used on the glimmer, but the better press plates can be used on the glimmer machine and the better press. I believe the better press is a slightly thinner piece of metal, and so it can handle going through both machines, where the glimmer plate's a little bit thicker, so it's not recommended to use with your better press. The other things that you will need are your plates for your glimmer. I use both my plates, the blue plate or the like frosted plate, and then the clear plate. And then I have to use a shim for mine because I know my machine. So that might be something that you want to figure out if you will need a shim. And the shim will also depend on your paper that you're using as well. And so my machine is ready. I'm going to take my plate and I'm going to put it on the heated platform. So this green light is telling me that this platform is heated. Now I need to heat the plate. To do that, you press this button and you'll see this bottom light flashing. Once that's solid, that means I can go ahead and run the plate setup through my machine. So I'm going to set this to the side while this is setting up, and I'm going to bring my machine in And hopefully, yeah, we can see everything good. And the other thing that you're going to want is so I didn't mention this, but I cut my hammer mill to 5x7 and I oversize it. Sometimes I oversize it because sometimes I don't lay this flat or it gets crooked when it goes through. So that gives me room to trim it down. When I cut it exactly to the A2, inevitably it shifts. So this allows for a little wiggle room. So we're going to wait for this green light to turn solid. And then I'm going to put the silver or the foil side down towards the plate. All right, it's a solid green now. So I'm going to go ahead and put my foil down, and then I'm going to take my paper, put it down. I go ahead and add these plates before I pull it off. You can pull it off and then assemble. And I just hold this sandwich in place, pull it out, and slowly run it through my better press, or excuse me, my die cutting machine. Sorry, it's shaking. It's the rivulets in the glimmer plate. Then carefully remove this. Make sure that you're being cautious of the platform. It does get hot underneath, so I typically try and hold it by the sides. And then I'm usually foiling more than one, so I go ahead and lock the platform back into the machine and set this aside. And I have recently been taking the plate off in between each use, particularly with the glimmer plates. I find the glimmer plates hold the heat more, and so the more you keep the plate on the heating element, the more likely the foil will like spread and you won't get that crisp line. So to avoid that, I take the plate off, let it cool while this is heating up, and then I start all over again. So I'm going to move the glimmer off of the screen. We'll do a reveal. Hopefully this turned out really nice and crisp, and it looks gorgeous. And so you can see I wasn't exact with my alignment, and so I'm a little over, which is one reason why I use the larger piece of paper. So this is perfect. If you have the flat plate and want to use the negative, you can keep this and set it aside. To do that, I'm going to put my machine away, and then we're going to work on blending the colors with the stencils. It is time to start stenciling and adding the color. I did finish my sentiment, so this is 3 layers of the die cut sentiment. 2 of them, the 2 bottom layers, are just plain white cardstock, and as you can see, it's the nice shape, and then I don't have to use foam for the sentiment to give it dimension. So once you have your foiled image and you're ready on your work surface, you're going to grab stencil number 1. On this die set, all the stencil numbers should be facing up, and the first 4, the stencil number is on the bottom left, and on the 5th one, it's on the bottom right. And what I usually do when I get new stencils is I take a little black Sharpie and I color over the etching, and then I wipe it off with a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and that will make the etching appear a lot easier because there's some color showing through, whereas when it's just the etching, it's very hard to see, and you have to get it in the right light to see it. So you can see here, it's really hard to see these corner lines, and if you take the black Sharpie, it just enhances the etching a little bit more. So we're going to start with layer 1, and I'm going to line my stencil up, and on these stencils, you really want the etching or the cutout to be within the foil lines. And then I'm going to take some tape, a little bit of low tack or removable adhesive, and tape this down on my sticky mat. The low tack tape was one item I didn't give in the initial supply and tool list. I am using the best ever tape from Spellbinders, and that's to hold the stencil in place. You may or may not need this depending on your work surface that you're using and the size of paper that you are inking on. If the paper was a little bit smaller, I would just use the sticky mat and the stencil would actually stick to the sticky mat. But because my paper is larger, there's really no grip on the stencil with the sticky mat. So the first color I am going to do is I'm going to lay down a little bit of tumbled glass on just the 3 petals. And this is where you can either use some really low tack tape. I would not use this. This will pull your foil up, but some low tack tape like the Post-it tape, you can cover these up if you want, or you can just use Post-it notes and cover it up. The other option is you can use copier paper. You'll just have to hold the copier paper. And once those areas that you don't want blue are covered, go ahead and add your ink. And I usually start in the center and work my way out towards the top of the petals. And I realized when I was making this during the first video, I thought the tumbled glass was a little too bright for the other colors, but I do like it. So what I ended up doing is, and I'm going to do this here, is I'm going to lay the tumbled glass as the first color, and then I'm going to come in with the Stormy Sky and go over it and darken, gray up that brightness a little bit so it tones it down a little. The other thing you want to be cognizant of when you're ink blending is you can oversaturate your ink blending, and it will spread under the stencil. So if you want a super saturated color, I suggest you lay some ink down, let the ink dry or absorb into the paper a little bit more, and then go back in with the color again. That will just help to keep the ink from spreading under your paper or under your stencil. Now I have a little bit of the Stormy Sky. I'm going to start in the center and just kind of work my way out towards the ends. And I'm going to leave it just like that. I like it nice and dark in the center. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the petals up now and do the berries. And I am going to use weathered wood for the berries. The other thing that you might want to do is some people might want to cover this up. I know I'm trimming this down, so I'm not worried about the edge. But if you're not sure, you might want to cover your edges up. All right, on to the next layer, which is stencil number 2. And again, the etching is at the bottom left, and I want to try and keep these stencil cut lines inside the foil that is on your image. And again, if you want to mask, you can mask. Don't pay attention a lot and end up coloring where I don't want color, so I try and mask. And you can also tear these too. So I'm going to cover this little berry up here, and I'm going to cover this berry. And then on this one, there's some of the pine cone, and I'm just going to cover that with paper. Now I'm going to use the Stormy Sky in the center and work its way out. Some other fun color combos might be like teals and pinks with the silver. That would be pretty. You can use purples. Really can make any color poinsettia that you want. I'm going to let that sit for a couple of seconds, and then I'm actually going to take the chipped sapphire and just do a little bit in the center. But the next thing I'll do while that's drying, I'm going to add lost shadow to these berries. So there's just a little bit difference in the colors on some of the berries. Now I'm going to come in the center with the chipped sapphire. And I'm going to do the cone with ground espresso. And cover my flower. All right, we're on to stencil number 3, and this last layer of the petals, I'm going to do all in Chip Sapphire. This is going to be a nice and dark color. And I'm going to come back with the, you can use Lost Shadow, Weathered Wood, but one of the grays for the berries. And I think I'm going to go with Lost Shadow. Actually, I'm going to just use whatever ink is left on my brush and Lost Shadow. I will use the Walnut Stain for the next layer of the pine cone. I think there's 3 layers to the pine cone. All right, we're on to stencil layer number 4. I'm going to use the mustard seed right in the center. And then I'm going to take the ground espresso and ink the last layer of the pine cone. And you can see here that I didn't line up one of my layers of the pine cone, and that looks like ground espresso. So I'm going to find that layer, which is this one here. So layer number 4, I'm going to realign it. Perfect. Now we're going to move on to the greens. And I will be using the Mowed Lawn and the Rustic Wilderness for this. And this is stencil layer number 5. I'm going to start with Mowed Lawn since it's the lighter of the two. And I'm definitely going to do the sprigs in the Mowed Lawn. And I'm going to keep the Rustic Wilderness to the holly leaves. This is the one part of all the stencils you want to be careful of is this little flap right here. So try and brush down with the green in this area. That way you don't push it up. Oops, I was using the wrong color. Beautiful. So even though I primarily did everything with Rustic Wilderness, this looks amazing. I love this image. Now you want to carefully remove your image from your sticky mat if that's what you're using, and that the best way to do that is to peel the sticky mat away from your image. It will help avoid the paper from curl or keep the paper from curling. Now we are going to trim this down. This needs to be trimmed down to a minimum of 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, depending on how much of this silver border you want. But I usually start doing is I just trim it down to a square or to a rectangle and get all my sides nice and straight. Now I have it nice and straight. So now I'm going to trim down. I want to take a little bit more off of the left side and a little bit more off the bottom, and then I'll start measuring it. The other thing you might want to do as well, which I should have done a little bit earlier, is sometimes the ink will pull on the foil. So you might want to just take, you can either take a piece of extra paper and just put it on top in case there's any ink sitting on the top of that foil. Or you can use a paper towel, but I would not smear it because if there is a lot of ink pooling on the foil, it will actually smear onto your white pretty background. So push it down and move your hand. Don't move whatever you're wiping it with. And so on this one, I have a little bit more of the silver showing than this one. It's really a personal preference. It's up to you. I'm really happy with this, so I'm going to use this, and I'm going to go ahead and glue the decorated panel to the silver mirror cardstock. And know that if you're foiling on, if you're gluing onto foil, it takes a little bit of time sometimes to really set and attach, and that sometimes these pieces, they move around a little bit until they're really set. So I'm going to just, I centered that. Now I'm going to take this panel and glue it centered on my card, my top fold. So just make sure your fold is at the top. I'm going to use glue again. Now you just need to decide where you want your sentiment. And I have a little bit of green here. I think that's going to have to be the way it is. I think I'm going to end up putting this Merry Christmas to the right, whereas on the sample I started with is on the left. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to my sentiment. Perfect. Very, very simple to make, super easy. You saw how quick that card came together, and it is striking. And you can see the difference in the colors in the berries by using the weathered wood and the lost shadow, and the really nice ink blending here with the blues. I hope you found this tutorial very helpful, and I hope you make some gorgeous cards. If you have any questions, you can always email info@craftsonthemove.com, and happy card making. Bye, everyone.